All right, welcome back to the Atlanta Construction Podcast. Very honored to have with us today our guest from the Ottawa, Ontario region, Casey Gray. Casey's the founder of the award-winning sustainable building company, The Conscious Builder. And you've probably seen Casey's company, The Conscious Builder podcast, and also The Conscious Builder show on YouTube. They've got 4,000 subscribers and literally tens of thousands hits on their videos. Casey brings 2 decades of experience to the construction industry and over a decade of experience running, owning, and growing multiple businesses, while also staying committed to his wife and son. Casey's on a mission to help people build homes, businesses, and lives in a more conscious manner. Casey, thanks so much. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, me as well. Maybe we could start with Casey, just a little bit about you personally and your background, and how the Conscious Builder company sort of started. It's a company that builds net zero and passive homes, and with your podcast and your Conscious Builder show on YouTube. You're a very busy man, and I know I've watched some of your other materials, and you made a decision, I think, in high school that the classroom necessarily wasn't for you, and wanted to get out there and work with your hands. And so maybe just for some of the young listeners who are thinking about the trades, maybe just talk a little bit about your personal journey.
Sure. I guess I'll go back to the high school portion. I guess that's where the construction started. And yeah, I went through high school, thinking I was going to become an engineer because I wanted to build stuff. I didn't really know what or why or anything at that point, right? Just figured I wanted to be an engineer, and was taking classes that would get me to that goal ultimately. But as I started to go through the years of high school, I realized that construction was really my best class by far, right? I think in my last year, I got like 97%, after the exam sort of thing. I actually went up after the exam. And obviously that was where I was being pulled to. And it just happened to be that throughout or during my last year, so grade 12, they started to push trades, and I didn't really know about it. I didn't really know about apprenticeships at the time. It was just really starting to be pushed into the schools more and more. And once I learned about it, I went home to my mom. I said, "Hey, this is what I want to do. This makes sense to me." And she was all for it, which was great. I didn't know how she was going to take it. So obviously that was the first step that I had to do. And after that, the rest of my classes kind of went downhill. And I think I passed calculus with like 50% or something like that. I'm pretty sure she passed me because I just said, "Hey, I just need to pass this." Yeah. Just so I can start my construction career. And yeah, that was kind of the beginning. So I left high school. I put it out there that I wanted to, work for somebody and start my apprenticeship. I had a few interviews that basically all they said was like, "Yeah, show up to work." And I'd show up to work and I'd be like, "Yeah, is this going to lead towards an apprenticeship?" And I think one was for Minto, so a big builder here in Ottawa. And they said no. So I'm like, "All right, well, I'm not interested." I walked away. Another one was like a trim company or something. And I think there was a third one. I can't remember what it was. But eventually I actually came to this one house and showed up, didn't know where I was supposed to be, just said, "Show up at this house." Showed up, there was a gated house on the Ottawa River, massive house, ringing the doorbell, asking for the boss at the time. Nobody's answering. Finally, somebody answers, "Oh, well, he's not here yet." So I just sat there waiting, and then he eventually showed up. I thought it was his house, but it ended up being the job. So my first job that I showed up, we were setting up 40-foot tall scaffolding on the back of this house because the windows were all leaking from all the wind. There are massive windows in the back of this house. And that was my first day on the job. And I ended up working for that company for almost 7 years. And after that, decided to go out on my own. I always wanted to go out on my own. I told my boss that since day one. I said, my ultimate goal is to go out on my own. Once again, didn't really know why. And eventually that day came and I decided to make the leap. And that eventually grew into the Conscious Builder. Now, where the Conscious Builder came into play was because my wife and I started to do a lot of personal development. And this is where the real change started to happen. And this is, hopefully we'll get into some of this stuff, but this is where my life started to change. Is I bought a book for my wife called The Success Principles by Jack Canfield. Can't remember why I bought her the book. No idea. In reading the book, though, she came across a story where Jack talked about Tony Robbins. And my wife remembered seeing this Tony Robbins guy on infomercials way back when she was a kid, watching it on like satellite TV in her grandparents' home, and said, you know what, I'm going to look into it, see what he's up to now, and found that he was doing these events. And one of his events is called Unleash Power Within, UPW for short. And she goes, hey, do you want to go to this event, this live event? It's like personal development thing. I said, sure. Typical guy, didn't ask any questions. I just said, yeah, sure, I'll go. No idea what I was walking into. 3.5-day event. Anyway, that event changed our life because that event was, I get goosebumps thinking about it, because that event changed the way that we thought, right? It changed our thinking. And if you change your thinking, you can change your life. Right. And what we came out of that, like we came out of that event, like on a high, like verbal diarrhea. Everyone's like, oh, you guys drank the Kool-Aid. Like now we know not to do that sort of stuff. Right. But that event was the catalyst to everything else that came after that. And eventually we went to more and more events. But from there, I started asking myself, why am I doing what I'm doing? What's the point of all this?
And this wasn't just a 2-week period where you kind of got a high off of that. It was something that really lasted and is still there today.
Yeah, it's work. It's like anything, right? Like you need to, wherever, it's like going to the gym, right? Like you need to put yourself into environments that inspire you. Like I realized that environment is more powerful than willpower. If you rely solely on your willpower, you will lose momentum. But if you put yourself into situations, into environments where you're forced to do better, to be better, to improve yourself, to grow, whatever it may be, even just to have conversations like this, you're forced to, by me talking about it, teaching. I always say, if you want to teach, learn. If you want to learn, teach. Yeah, because you're forced to do these things, right? So that's one of the biggest things that I've learned in going through this whole personal development.
Yeah, it's like you connect yourself.
It's never over.
You're connecting yourself with and attracting certain kinds of people. And when you're surrounding yourself with those kinds of people, it kind of elevates you. And even like you said, with willpower, it's going to fade. It's going to linger. It's going to be up and down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll just end that where once I started asking the why, the biggest catalyst for where the Conch Builder came into play was we ended up going to another Tony Robbins event, because we ended up signing up for a whole bunch. It was kind of like his mastery university. And one of them is called Date with Destiny. That one's a 5-day course. And when he says a day, like they're not like 6, 7, 8 hour days. These are like 12, 13, 14, like they're long days. The guy's a machine, right? And they're like rock concerts, but without the drugs. And you come out feeling way better. And at that event, we actually found out that we're having our first son. And that's when it really started to sink in, because I was thinking to myself, if I was going to tell this little person that he can be or do whatever he wants, then I need to do the same thing. And I also need to lead by example, because anybody who has any kids realizes whether they're honest with themselves or not, it's kind of, kids do what you do, not what you say, right? If your kids have a bad habit, chances are they got it from you, unless they're a little bit older and they have other friends. But when they're younger, they're picking it up from their parents, right? It's whoever they're around most. Right. So that becomes very evident. I always say my greatest teacher, besides Tony Robbins, my greatest teacher is my son, because of that reason. He does what I do.
What's your son's name, Casey?
Sullivan.
And how old is he?
He is 8 now.
Wow. So is he on the job sites with you?
Not on the job sites. But sometimes I bring him out and about, but I'm not even on every single job site too often. I'm behind the computer a lot, right? We got guys on the site. And when I go see clients, I'm not bringing them with me, obviously with school and stuff like that. But if there's anything ever to do on the weekends, yeah, he's coming along with me. I got to rent some rental properties. He comes with me, he helps me. I put him to work and he sees what's required, but then, he gets rewarded for his work too. And so he helps out with wherever he can, even if there's stuff to do around the house. For our deal with our son is like, we're not going to pay you to do, we're not going to give you an allowance, right? You're part of this family. You help out. That's part of being part of the family and being under the roof. But if you ever do any help or do any work for any of the companies, then you will get paid for your time for that. Right. So that's kind of how we're training to deliver that value but also be a part of the family and want to help out too. So we find that that's a better way to approach it.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear. It's thanks for sharing a little bit about your personal journey, because we can talk a lot about technical aspects and all kinds of different topics in construction, but just to hear a little bit about someone like yourself and the milestones that kind of when you had your son and the change of thinking. And I think I remember reading a book called As a Man Thinketh. I can't remember the author's name, but I agree. The mind's so powerful. Oh, you have it right behind you.
James Allen.
James Allen. That's what I was going to say. John Allen. I wasn't sure. So, yeah, but I totally agree. It's mind's a powerful thing, and the more that we can control the way we think, and I guess just the idea that we can change the way we think is major. It kind of sounds cliche, but it's so powerful. So, 100% agree.
Yeah.
So for the Conscious Builder, for your company, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're building multiple homes throughout the year, assuming in the Ottawa region of Ontario, and these could be passive homes, net zero homes, maybe not as many net zero, but some R2000. Is that right? Kind of a mix of those three.
Yeah, so we do renovations and custom homes. So we still do a lot of renovations. So we're only doing usually a couple homes a year, and then the rest is major renovations. So additions, energy retrofits. Some of them cost as much as building a home. In terms of what we're building, sometimes passive. Lately, it's been more net zero. R2000 kind of seems to have fallen away since the Canadian Home Builder Association, CHBA, has introduced the new building standard called net zero. So that's kind of been a lot of our focus, because we find that it seems to be a fairly reasonable target to aim for, and it's not too difficult. The paperwork isn't too extreme. You're not spending a whole lot on certification. So it seems to be a good target that a lot of our clients are aiming for. Some of them are maybe aiming for beyond that, but that would be the certification that we'd end up getting on a lot of the houses.
Right. And so just for our listeners, let's, for some of the people tuning in that have an interest in sustainability, passive homes, net zero homes, and we just maybe kind of lay the foundation and talk a little bit about terminology and exactly what each term means, just quickly, obviously. But for a passive house, can we just define a passive house?
Yeah. So maybe I'll work from building code up. Does that work for you?
That'd be great. Exactly.
So building code. So I like to put this out there, and I got this from one of my teachers who I still learn from. He's retired now in the construction world. Ross Elliott. He's who I started working with him when we built our first passive home, and he owned a company called HomeSol, which we still work with. And but Ross Elliott said the building code is the worst home that you're allowed to build by law.
The minimal,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you don't want to go to jail, that's what you build. so that's the way. And that always stuck with me. So I like to say it. So that's building code, right? And yes, building code gets better and better, and for the most part, structural stays the same. But things that we're really focused on is really the energy consumption, the energy use of these homes, the heating, cooling, that sort of stuff. So once you leave that, you hit Energy Star. Everybody knows about Energy Star. That's essentially about 20% better than building code. Now, keep in mind the building code gets better and better. So Energy Star homes, built, 12 years ago are actually worse than building code now. So, so keep that in mind when you're
it's ever changing.
Thinking of all these other ones. Now, after that, you get into like LEED certification, which ranges between like 20 and 60% better than building code. We don't see that a lot in residential because it's more of a commercial thing, and it's based on points and materials. So a LEED certified home doesn't necessarily mean that it's more energy efficient. It might just mean that it used better products. So we've never actually done a LEED home. Like I said, it's not big in residential, and it is a lot of paperwork on the energy advising side.
Unlike some of the other standards, is LEED more specific to materials than some of the others? It's both. And they're all both, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So no, they're not all both. So the other ones don't necessarily care about what materials.
It's all about energy usage.
It's all about energy usage. LEED is the only one that cares about materials, at least in the ones that we're talking about. You can go like really crazy and go to the Living Building Challenge, which is like basically using no plastic in your house.
Yeah. Right? But I hear you about the LEED certification. I've been on some commercial projects where the LEED paperwork is like 20% of the time spent on some of these jobs.
Like the building materials. Yeah, the carpentry training, like at Algonquin College here in Ottawa, they have a LEED certified building, which is like the trade building. And they built this trade building, it might have been LEED platinum or LEED gold at least, but the whole woodworking shop is full of glass, which is terrible. And there's no parking. So you have a trade building with no parking for any of the guys that are trades to park their trucks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but they got points for it because if
Right.
you don't have parking, then you get points. So
Right.
it doesn't necessarily make sense.
But that's where the human factor comes in, right? I mean, there's always the human factor at the end of the day.
Yeah. So then we go on to like net zero, which would be 30-40% better than building code. R2000 would be about 50% better than building code. And then we start to get into passive house, which is like 80% plus better than building code. Now, all of these are just certifications, right? And they have to be certified by some third-party certifier. They're all they all have different requirements in terms of the energy use and how they're measured. Even Passive House, there's two different institutes. You can go through Passive House International or you can go through Passive House US, and there's some tweaks in terms of, like, for example, the first house that we built, Passive House US, was fairly new. So we missed a few things. We didn't get Passive House US because of one item that they have that we couldn't pass, but we got Passive House International certification.
Is that the home?
Ultimately, it's focused on.
Is that the home that you built in 2016 or 2017, where you give a presentation to the Engineering Association in Ottawa?
Yeah. So that one I built about 8 years ago. I don't even know. So yeah, what year we're going into 20? Yeah, it was 2014 when we moved into that house.
Right.
And but yeah, so Passive House would be one of the most rigorous building standards in the world, and they focus on the heating and cooling demand as well as the air tightness. So a big thing in building a high performance home is making sure that the envelope is done well. So that's our main focus. We don't care if people get certification on their homes. We do need to hit a target, but we're constantly educating and talking to people about how do we improve the envelope of the home, because that is one thing that if you do it right, you never have to worry about it again. If you do it wrong, you have a big problem on your hand, but there's no moving parts, right? It's not like a mechanical equipment where you have to replace it. You do it and you leave it and you forget about it. As long as you're not poking holes through it and
all right, let's
doing something new, then you should be good.
Let's piggyback on that and talk about building envelope, because obviously, like you said, that's one of the kind of the key, the foundations or the key parts of a passive house, which, like you said, is one of the most rigorous standards to live up to and to build to. What are we talking for R value? Is it R72? Is it, whereas typically R20 for in the building code for an exterior wall assembly?
So it varies. And it varies because it's modeled depending on the lot, the design, the shading. All of these things are factored into each individual house. So my house that I had built, for example, the backyard was facing south. If you were to take that house and put it on the other side of the road where the backyard would have been facing north, it would not have got Passive House certification the way it was built. You would have had to either change the windows, make the windows even better potentially, or increase all of the R values in all of the assemblies, under the slab, in the walls, in the roof, everywhere.
Right.
So it takes into account a lot of things. Same thing, if you build a house next to a tall building and you don't get any sun, it takes that into account. Now, I do want to caveat that with Passive House certification is different than a passive solar house. So there's a lot of people that say, oh, I built a passive solar house, but that just means that they're trying to take advantage of the sun to heat their house, right? As opposed to actually getting the certification and getting the 0.6 air changes per hour and getting it down to 15,000 kilowatts for the year, right?
And
so
can I quickly ask, the Passive House certification, that certification, although the word house is there, can refer to an ICI building or structure as well. It could be commercial, institutional, but the term is the same.
It's actually, so Passive House comes from the German term Passive House, which is HAUS, which in German means building, not house. So they call it Passive House just in Canada and the US and North America.
So yeah,
but it's actually easier to certify the larger the building, the easier it is to get Passive House certification.
Why is that?
It's because it's a volume thing, right? So when you start factoring in all the different calculations and you start doing floor door tests and more, like it's a lot easier to hit the air changes per hour to get the air tightness you need. And then especially if you're doing a multi-unit building, you have a lot more heating systems, right? So So it's easy to you separate, like each unit. Some units might only have one exterior wall, right? So you're talking, one exterior wall that's thermally broken from the outside. The rest will still have insulation and air sealing because of soundproofing, but it's a very different calculation.
Yeah, because I think I was listening to that presentation you gave to the Engineering Association of Ottawa, and I think that was maybe in 2018. But I think you said the passive house certification you achieved on that home was 4,000 square feet, and the fresh air systems were 18,000 BTUs for 4,000 square foot home, where typically for just a low, like the bare bones building code standards, it'd be 90,000.
Yeah, for that. So
that's a big difference.
Yeah, so that would have been our heating load. That would have been what we were required based on the modeling.
Right.
So now keep in mind the way that I approach it too. So we don't do the calculations. Like I said, we work with HomeSol, but any energy advisor, you can find passive house consultants all over that now, and they don't even necessarily have to be in your city either, right? Because when you're doing the passive, unless you just need somebody on site to do the blower door test, but all the calculations can be off site. So you can work with anybody. The thing to keep in mind is that I like to approach it from the reality side, right? In theory, certain things work, right? So in theory, when we designed our house, and I talked about this on that presentation, in theory, we had enough heat, right? And everything was great. And we had the shading and everything. So in theory, everything was perfect on paper. But in reality, what happened in that house was we did have overheating, but in the winter months, because we would block the sun in the summer months, so everything was great. But then when it was really cold out, typically it's nice, a clear day, and the sun's low, so the overhangs doesn't block it. So now we get that passive solar heat that I was talking about. Right. But now all of a sudden it's like 28 degrees in the house. Yeah. And it stays in there, right? That's the whole point of a passive house. You get the heat and it stays in there. So now you start opening windows. So it's not necessarily, it's not comfortable at that point, right? So it's fine. Like, it's one of those things where whenever we work with clients, it's like, here's in theory what's going to happen, but in reality, this is likely what's going to happen based on our experience. So as long as you're comfortable with this, the few days out of the year where this is going or might happen, just giving you a heads up sort of thing, right? And we can all live in our house, but most people I find want they want maintenance-free homes, right? They want to set it and forget it. That's usually not the case. You have to do something with houses, but that's ultimately what we're aiming for. Right.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Back to or continuing on the path with building envelope. All the different scenarios and variables that come into play. Like you said, it could be whether it's the sunlight and how much glazing on the south side, or thermal bridging, windows and where they're placed, and talk about windows. Placement, R value. What's happening to achieve a passive home certification? What are some of the key things when it comes to glazing?
For glazing, once again, it'll depend on the modeling and the orientation of the house. But I can tell you, when the houses that we've worked on, is you're going to have different glazing depending on the side of the home that you're talking about. So, for example, on your south-facing windows, you may want a higher solar heat gain coefficient. So you want that solar heat to come into your house. However, on the north wall, which you never get direct sunlight from, you won't want that. You'll actually want a higher R value, right? So the solar heat gain coefficient will become lower. So when essentially the better a window performs, the less solar heat gain you're going to get from it, which makes sense. Right. And that's going to come down to different coatings. You can use argon gas or krypton gas. Like, there's all sorts of different ways to do it. You can get in, there's different spacers. Usually it's triple glazed for sure, but not every window is necessarily Passive House certified. So if you are going to get a certification for Passive House, you want to go to Passive House certified windows. There are some coming to Ottawa. We don't have any experience with them yet, to Canada. But in our past, we've been using European windows for the most part.
What are the frames made of? Are they vinyl frames, aluminum frames, or different?
We've done vinyl. We've done fiberglass. We've done wood, aluminum-clad wood. So you can do all of the above. The best performing ones are actually fiberglass.
Right. And is that because there's a thermal bridge there? Whereas with
Yeah, well,
aluminum,
so it's a thermal break, right? Aluminum's going to perform the worst in terms of a thermal break. Now, fiberglass is the best, and it could even be insulated within that fiberglass as well. Wood is nice because it's a natural product, but there could be some maintenance to it, obviously. And aluminum clad wood is expensive, but fiberglass is also expensive too. So a lot of people end up going with PVC just because of pricing. Like it's expensive, like to get the passive house certified windows.
What about the installation of these windows in the rough openings in a 2x6 or 8 wood stud wall? And like, is there what's different about that process and the joints of the perimeter? Is there different materials used there?
Yeah, it'll depend on the manufacturer, right? So you have to work with the manufacturer and how it gets sealed. And it really depends on your wall assembly too, because when you have a wall, like you said, it's R72. R72 is probably thinking back. Yeah, R72 has been the least amount of insulation we've had to put into a certified passive house. We've gone up to, I think, R94, I think is one we did in the city. And when you model that house too, where that window goes in the wall assembly affects how the whole house performs, right? So if you want that window towards the outside, or if you want that window towards the inside, or you want it in the middle, all of those things are going to affect the numbers that get spit out by the modeling software and whether or not it's going to get certified or not.
You really have to be a building science expert, huh?
Well, you need to work with building scientists. You know, that's the thing. And whatever, that's why you need the whole team on board. And that's why we always, when we're talking to our clients, we want everybody on board from the beginning, and we call it the integrated design process. I'm sure you've heard that, the IDP. And because everybody brings a different skill to the table, and all of those skills are important, right? We're going to talk about practicality as a contractor and constructability and pricing. The energy advisor is the building scientist, right? That's going to talk about that. But they're obviously really good at what they do, but some of their ideas might not make practical sense on a construction site. Right. And same with the architect, the designer, they have all sorts of great ideas. But in reality, what gets drawn on a piece of paper is often a lot harder to build or more expensive to build than what we expect it to be. Right. So that's why everyone's kind of needs to be talking and working together right from the start. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's always a collaboration that leads to the best result. I think, can you elaborate a little bit too on just with your experience, like, kind of think of wall assemblies like you're baking a cake. You know, there's all kinds of different ingredients, and you can put different ones together, and it changes so many variables. But like for an you mentioned R90 might have been the highest of one you recently built in Ottawa, in downtown recently. For insulation, like whether it's rigid or it's a cavity rock, a mineral bats, or a spray foam, polyurethane spray foam, closed cell, or is there a certain like combination that you feel is the best wall assembly for a passive home, or what typically do you see in a lot of the homes that you're building that are passive homes?
I guess it depends on what you mean by best, right? Is, best the most cost effective, or is best best performing, right? And I guess it's gonna vary depending on what you want for exterior cladding, right? So obviously, here's what I'll say is that it's gonna vary again, right, from project to project. But when you're getting into a wall that's that thick, you need to think about what's going to happen when moisture gets into it. Not if moisture gets into it, what happens when moisture gets into it. We just have to assume that there's going to be a leak, or there's going to be some vapor diffusion that goes through it, or maybe you get a pinhole. Because when you're building a house that's 0.6 ACH or less, every little hole in that assembly is basically going to be like a jet of air shooting through that assembly. And if that air is carrying moisture, it's going to bring moisture into that assembly, if you're following what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. So knowing that, we need to use materials that are vapor permeable and that will allow themselves to dry, and so that your whole wall can dry either towards the inside or dry towards the outside, because it's going to change depending on the season that you're in, right? So the heat is going to want to drive it one way in 1 year or one part of the season, and it's going to go in the opposite way in the other part of the season. So I always tell people, you want to think about the envelope of your building as the skin of your body, right? We don't want it to breathe, right? We have our lungs to breathe. That would be our fresh air system, our ERVs and HRVs. That's how we want to control the air coming and going from our house. But then we want to allow our envelope, our skin, to perspire but not breathe, right? You're not going to breathe through your skin, but you're going to sweat through your skin and you can dry out and so forth. So that's what we want to think about when it comes to our wall assemblies is how can vapor travel through it. There's all sorts of great products out there. When you get into a wall that's thick, we're not going to get into foam typically, right? Sure, you can use foam, but we've never used foam on a wall that has that much of an R value. We're doing foam where maybe it's a 2x6 wall and we're just adding foam to the outside and that's it. But as soon as we get into double stud walls or even doing eye joists vertically up the outside of a house, like it has to be something that can get wet and dry, not lose its R value, not have mold, and allow moisture to travel in both directions.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's kind of like where the rubber meets the road, no pun intended, but like there's so many different aspects to take into consideration. Like, you know, you have then from that, what you just explained to your architectural situation with whatever cladding is desired on the outside, and then what kind of a clip or what kind of a substructure needs to be associated with that to achieve the elevation, the look that you want for your cladding. And then even when you add in things like you said, that are important, like overhangs, then there's and that's an important element of a passive home as well. But then there's a structural element and there's protrusions and fasteners. And so then it becomes all kinds of, combination of problems to solve all within the same, 100 square feet of the envelope there.
Yeah. And once you've done it a few times, like we've done enough wall assemblies to figure out what works, what doesn't work, or what works well. But it's still, everything we do is custom, right? We've never built the same house twice. So there's always something new to have to figure out or navigate or have a conversation about, because we're also doing it with clients who have never done this before. So they're going to ask questions, well, why can't I do that? Or how can we do it, sort of thing, right? So it doesn't matter if we think it's right or not. Like it's still a matter of having the conversation saying, we can do this, but here are the implications by doing this. Here's what's going to happen.
I'm curious, and I think a lot of our listeners would be curious. So when you get a contract to build a home that is desired to have a passive house certification, I assume, there's someone there governing that. How often, or, from the start of the job to the end, and to someone documenting that certification? Is it a third party, and who are they representing? Who's the governing body? How does that part of the process work?
So for passive house, you have your passive house consultant. So it'll be an energy advisor, right? So in our case, we hire HomeSol, and they're checking the calculations before we start building, right? And the actual design to make sure that we're going to hit it. Then once it's on site, they'll just need to check to make sure that we actually built it as per the specifications. So they don't have to be on site all the time. They just need to make sure that they've
just
seen
different
what
phases.
we've done.
Yeah.
And then they're going to do the blower door test to make sure that we hit our ACH of 0.6 or less. And then after that, once we've built everything and they do the final blower door test, that gets sent off to whichever governing body, like whether it's Passive House International, Passive House US, and then it gets verified by them, right? So it's like a third party verification, and then they send it back after that, assuming everything's good.
Right.
And they'll check all the equipment. They make sure that everything, like, because you have to basically design this all ahead of time, right? So and they just check to make sure you did it as per what you said it would be.
Right. Yeah. There's so many interesting points when it comes to this arena of sustainability and all these different certifications. Like we talked a little bit about envelope, window performance, orientation of the home, to the south side, and the sunlight, and some things like overhang. But what about, after the building's built and you're building that as tight as you possibly can with a very high R value, fresh air still has to move. So talk a little bit about the systems that are in some of these homes. I know in some of your presentations you talked about how you're, trying to talk people out of bathroom fans and even range hood for dryer vents and those kind of things, that come into play here too after that structure's built the way that it requires to meet the standards.
Yeah, so like I alluded to this before, the lungs of the house, right? So the idea is we want to make our house as airtight as possible, and the way we do that is by eliminating as many penetrations as possible through that air barrier. Now, where do the penetrations come into our building typically? Well, if you have natural gas, there's going to be, a line coming in through that. You obviously have electricity. You're going to have a line coming in through that. And then you're going to have any vents, right? So if you are heating your passive house with natural gas, you're going to have your exhaust vent, you're going to have your intake, you're going to have all of your bathroom fans, you're going to have your kitchen range hood, you're going to have, what am I missing? If you have solar panels, there's another electrical. So these are all penetrations going through the air barrier. And then obviously you have all these screws potentially, and in a typical home, where they use the poly as the air barrier, you'd have a hole at every single plug, essentially on an exterior wall, which in most houses, you put your hand this time of year up against that and you'll feel the cold air coming through it. It's terrible. But the idea is you eliminate all that. Now, when it comes to vents, you have to think about when you turn a bathroom fan on or a kitchen range hood, it's sucking air out of the house. So that's not just air that it's sucking out, but that air has to be replaced, right? It always has to be balanced. You can't suck air out of the house without bringing air into the house at the same time, right? You can't depress. To some extent, I guess you can depressurize a house, right? At different times of year, the stack effect and all that. But if it's minus 25 degrees outside, and you turn on your kitchen range, and I think I have a blog post, it was an old one, it might be gone now, but there's a calculation I got from this friend of mine, Matt Peterson. He owns HVAC Design Experts. And in his calculation, he says, if you turn on 1,000 CFM kitchen range hood, which is way more than what we need. McDonald's restaurants, by the way, have 300 CFM.
Do some people have 1,000 CFMs in their homes?
Or
these people
like
that are
the
just
restaurant
cooking with grease and those kind of things?
Yeah, well, they just think it's cool. It's like they sell them for some reason. We just did a house and we just renovated a 160-year-old stone home, and he loved to cook. So we had this huge, massive propane range. It's the only thing, because we turned their house to fossil fuel free. We got them off the oil, but he wanted to keep his propane tanks for this kitchen, and he had a 1,500 CFM
Hell's
range
Kitchen.
of it. Yeah. And I'm like, you can't, like, that's dangerous. If you have fuel burning, especially after we did the work, because we made the house so airtight, even this 160-year-old house, which is on our YouTube channel, by the way, if anybody wants to watch that. But if you have fuel burning appliances and you have big exhaust fans like that, it becomes dangerous to turn those exhaust fans on when your house is too airtight, because it sucks that CO2 into your house. Right. So you then need makeup air. So then you're basically bringing in more cold air when you turn these things on. So when you start thinking about all that, okay, well, does it make sense to have a bathroom fan? Does it make sense to have a kitchen range hood? But you're thinking, well, what do I do instead? Right. Well, the answer is an HRV or ERV. I reckon in where we live, it's an ERV, right? Because the difference between an HRV and an ERV is the core. An HRV cannot transfer humidity or moisture through a core, whereas an ERV can.
And E's for entropy, right?
Yeah. So everyone calls it energy, but it originally stood for enthalpy. That's good. Good. You know that. A lot of people don't. Most people call it energy recovery ventilators. But the word enthalpy means the transfer of moisture. And that's where the ERV originally came from. And the idea behind that is that as the air comes in, right, it runs 24/7, right? Because we always want air coming into, we want fresh air coming into our house, just like we breathe 24/7. We want the same thing coming to our houses. So these units run 24/7. So they're constantly bringing in fresh air at a low CFM, but instead of just bringing that minus 25 degree air in, I didn't finish my calculation. Sorry, I'll go back. So Matthew Peterson, just to finish off that, if you turn on 1,000 CFM range hood and it's minus 25 outside, and you have 20 degree air inside, it might've been 22 in the calculation, you lose 80, if I remember correctly, 89,000 BTUs per hour by running that 1,000 CFM range hood. Per hour.
Wow.
That's crazy. My whole house, like you mentioned at the beginning,
is 18,000.
Not the house I'm in. Needed 18,000 to heat the entire house, 4,000 square feet. So knowing that, you're just wasting. So every time you turn on a fan, it's not only is it bringing in that cold air, it's also bringing in all the pollutants that are in your wall, right? So if you have fiberglass or something that you don't want to breathe in, and it's sucking that into your house, because it's just going to find the holes and it's going to bring it in. It could be mold, it could be anything, right? So with these ERVs running 24/7, the air that's coming into your house is getting filtered and it's fresh, and it gets preconditioned by the air leaving the house. So that means the only energy you're using is the energy to run the fan in that unit. And then it's just preconditioning the air. It doesn't mix the air. It just preconditions it through the core, where it transfers as much of that heat as possible. And depending on the unit that you get, will have different efficiency ratings, right? The Passive House certified units will have a better efficiency rating than the lower ones, but there's a lot of good North American ones now.
Right.
was a long roundabout way, but we always just have to think about when you do one thing, what else gets affected. We have to think of our buildings, not just our homes, our buildings as a system. Mm-hmm. When you do one thing, another thing will be affected. Like I've done a video too on basements, because basements, I don't know, are basements big where you are? Do you have basements?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's anywhere where there's cold weather for the most part, unless it's permafrost. You have basements, and
because you're going below frost level with your structure. Is that why?
Well, that's where they came from, right?
Yeah.
Basements became because they had to dig down, they had to get below frost line, and that's where a basement came from. But eventually somebody said, well, we're already digging down anyways. Why not turn this into livable space, right? So they just made it a little bit deeper, and then they made it part of the house and it became livable condition. But a basement, the climate within a basement is completely different than the climate on a first or second floor of a house. Right? You have to treat your basement differently than the rest of your house, right? So these are all things, right? So it's the whole building as a system, understanding how everything works. One thing affects another. Everything that happens in a basement is different from the rest of your house. Understanding that and expecting it to be the same is just setting yourself up for failure.
What's your take on ICI foundations, the insulated concrete, or
the ICFs? We use them a lot, partly because we can do them in-house, right? We don't need a forming company. So if we have to, which is really helpful for additions, it's hard to find forming companies, especially now. We were talking about labor shortages earlier before, we hit record, and it just makes sense for some of the smaller projects to do it in-house. Now, foam is not great for the environment, but overall, I think it's a good option for some projects. It just makes sense, whether it's for timing or whether it's for our value. Now, keep in mind that there's a lot of greenwashing, misinformation around the performance of an ICF. Talk to energy advisors if you are using it for it. Don't take the word from the ICF company about the fact that they have an R50 wall assembly assembly with their ICF, because it doesn't actually calculate that way when you put it into the modeling software that the energy advisors use.
And make sure the install has the right interval, so the built-in studs have carry through symmetrically. Yeah. The guy's putting the sheeting inside. A little frustrating. Tell me, does every passive home certification or also ask for net zero home too, which is a step above? Is there a solar panel element to every home that you build with these certifications?
No. So net zero. Passive house is beyond net zero in terms of certification. There's two. So the CHPA standards, there's net zero energy, and then there's net zero energy ready. The net zero energy ready is essentially means if you put solar panels on, you could be net zero. Now, there's a difference between a net zero home and an off-grid home too, right? And I have these conversations with people too. They're like, well, I'm going to go net zero. Could I go off-grid? The answer is no, not where we live. If you wanted to go off-grid, you'd be basically building a passive house, because you need to design for the worst day or worst week of the year, as opposed to averaging throughout the entire year. A net zero home basically averages throughout the entire year, and it's based on, it just looks at your roof calculation and says, hey, do you have enough room to put enough solar panels on your roof that will cover your energy consumption? That's how, as opposed to, could you actually survive if you lost power? And then you get into battery storage and all sorts of other things, right? But heating and hot water are still the two biggest culprits for using energy.
Right. So what about
the other thing too is plug loads.
Is what, sorry?
Plug loads, right? You could build the same house for a family of 3 and a family of 6, and the family of 6 is obviously going to have a very different energy bill than the family of 3, right? So.
Right. So other than solar, are there other renewable energy elements to these homes as well in certain situations, or mainly solar is that one renewable element?
Solar is the only way that you could reasonably add. Like obviously, like if you think of renewable energy, it's really solar, wind or water, right? In terms of hydroelectricity. So on homes, you're not going to put up a big windmill, right? So it's going to be solar panel power for homes.
So does the building code have a initiative or a goal to have all homes to be net zero by 2030? Is that still a goal? And what's your take on that?
Yeah.
Is it
all new homes?
All new homes that are
all
built.
New homes.
Yeah.
So I've been saying this for a while now.
It's only 8 years away, so I'm just wondering, like, in your opinion, are we moving rapidly enough toward that for that to be realistic? Or?
I think yes, but not necessarily because we're building better homes, but because technology is getting better.
Right.
Solar panels are becoming more effective, right? So they're producing more electricity than they were 10 years ago. Technology grows and gets better exponentially, right? Our human brains can't comprehend that. We are not necessarily building, I don't think we're building homes better, that much better. Like if you think about how we were building homes 100, 150 years ago versus how we're building homes today, it's not that much different. We're still slapping wood together, at least in Canada, right? We're still slapping wood together. And the only difference is we're adding, we changed it from 2x4s to 2x6s, and we added some insulation.
Yeah.
Right. And at first we didn't really understand how that affected everything. We got into air barriers, vapor barriers, and weather barriers, and people still don't know the difference between an air barrier and vapor barrier a lot of the time. And that's when they run into problems. But it hasn't gotten that much better. So I think there's a lot of training that needs to be done still. So I think because of technology, we can get to net zero. The bigger problem that we have is what do we do with the existing housing supply? But that being said, if solar panels get better and better, and we can take a 100-year-old leaky house that hasn't had any work and put solar panels on it, and it becomes net zero, then great. That solves one problem. But the problem that I am focusing on is more about the health of the home and the occupants, for the occupants that live in it. Right? I think we underestimate how much time we spend indoors, especially now. Other than putting the garbage out, I haven't had, actually I was on a job site yesterday, but there's some days I won't leave the house for 3 days.
Well, especially for the last 2 years, your office is at home. A lot of people. Yeah.
I'm at home. I work from home. I don't need to drive anywhere. I try to put all my driving into one day just to be efficient. So I'm home for like 3-4 days in a row sometimes. But I'm inside this time of year, right? In the summer, I'll go out, we're on the water here, and I'll, go paddleboarding. But in the winter, I'm like, I don't feel like going outside. Yeah. So unless I had to, I'm more of like, let's go outside and do something. And I don't have a ski hill next door, so I can't, it's not that easy. But or else I would do that. But the Environmental Protection Agency, this is old stats from I think 6 years ago, but the EPA ranks indoor air quality as one of the top 5 risks to our health. Right? So what does that mean? That means that there's a lot of pollutants in our houses that we're not aware of. Hence why we're focused more on building envelope, air tightness, ventilation, making sure that the indoor air quality is good so that it doesn't affect your health, right? Which is going to affect your energy. It's going to affect your mood, how you feel, how you interact with people. I think that's the part that's getting missed is we're talking about energy and we're talking about carbon footprint, which is great. Those are all good things. But what we're not talking about is, okay, well, what's happening to the people who live in these houses? Right? What's a benefit to them? And the thing is a lot of people are focused on the stuff that they can see, right?
The aesthetics.
It's the stuff that it's the bank account. How much is this going to cost me? How much is it going to save on my energy bill? How much carbon emissions am I going to save? Those are all great things, right? But the stuff that we can't see is kind of what we like to focus on at the Conscious Builder. First of all, it's just like when we build an envelope, it's all the stuff behind the wall that you can't see. Right. That's where we put so much of our time and effort. People will hire us to do all the stuff that gets covered up essentially. Yeah. Right? So we do a lot of projects where we don't have finished pictures because we did the envelope for the home and the client will take over and do their own finishing or interiors.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And, but it's the same thing when you're talking indoor air quality and the health of the occupants. They won't see it, but they'll feel it. And the thing is, they might not even, or smell it. Right. And they might not even realize it until they leave, go somewhere and come back. And where it hit me is when we built that first passive house, we went to Florida for 3 months. I was back and forth for a month, but I would leave for 4 weeks and come back. Our house would be vacant. Right. And most of the time you leave your house, you come back to a vacant house. You're like, oh, what's that smell? It doesn't smell good. In reality, that's how your house smells all the time. You just got used to it. So you didn't smell it. I left my house and then came back and my house smelled like wood. Like fresh wood, all the pine and reclaimed wood we had, it smelled like wood. Like that to me is a healthy home. And you can't see that in a picture. You can't show it in a video. You can't show it on a podcast. Right, you just have to experience it or believe the person, right? And until you experience it, it's really hard for people to like comprehend it and see value in it.
For your, one of the really commendable parts of your business, the Conscious Builder, is the academy, and I think you put a lot of effort into training and you say like it's one thing to be be a conscious builder and to be building these net zero and passive homes, which is that's where the industry is headed, just like every other industry. But the training, how important is that part and that element to have people that are skilled and knowledgeable enough to do the right practices and know enough to come in and do those retrofits of to get those R values and to build those wall assemblies and to have the knowledge of the different scenarios and all that stuff.
Well, that's everything in mind. Like we're doing great work and we have an amazing team here, and we're showcasing what we can on YouTube and talking about it here on podcasts and stuff, but we're still one small company, right? And we can only do, like I said, a couple houses a year, a handful of renovation projects, big projects. We can only have so much of an impact. So where I see the biggest potential and the biggest area for change is to help other contractors like us, like where I was 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when I started the business, to become better contractors, to become better business people, to understand that, and to then build better homes as well, right? So I think that's how we're going to really give back, and how we're going to make a big difference is if everybody starts building like this, because there's more than enough work, right? I don't need to compete with other contractors on pricing or anything like that. And like none of us, I learned early in the business when I started, when I would go to like the renovator council meetings, or like in our local association, the guys sitting around that table weren't my competition. The competition were the guys that weren't a part of the association, undercutting everyone and not understanding what was actually required to build better, and not doing contracts properly, and basically going out of business because the two tail light warranty sort of thing. That was the competition, so to speak. They're not really competition in the sense that we're not competing on the same playing field, but that was the type of people that I was losing to at the beginning of the career, right? And you think that you need to lower your price in order to get the jobs, but that's not how you do it. So that's where I feel like if everybody and the contractors, if we can help them understand business, stay in business, and then understand the building science side of it, then we can all have a much greater impact, because then those people go, if I educate one person or two people, and then those two people educate two people each, and so forth, right? That's how we're going to have the biggest impact in this world.
Right. Well, we've mentioned building code quite a bit. When you say building code, are you referring to the national building code, like the most recent one, or is there one that's provincial as well for your local area and its specific?
Yeah, we deal with the Ontario Building Code here, which is more rigorous than a lot of other areas.
I'm curious what the differences might be with here in Atlantic Canada compared to Ontario. I'm sure there's a few differences.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with Atlantic or Canada and what your building code is there. Like for the most part, they're going to be similar. Like they still reference the national building code. Yeah. I think some of the changes for us might be around the energy use and stairs and railings is another one, which is a bit of a pain. And there's all sorts of new changes coming out. But
yeah, well, we had a couple of engineers on a few months back, and they were talking about some passive home topics. And I know a lot of our listeners here in the Atlantic region they're business owners, they're contractors. A lot of them are PMs for large general contractors and commercial, institutional, or ICI construction. But these people that are tuning in, some of them are students too. They care a lot about this topic specifically. They really want to build with. They want to build consciously and build things right, and sustainability is on everyone's minds, whether wherever you're located or whatever form of construction you're in, be it commercial, residential, or. So I just think that what your company specifically, and then the podcast and the Builder Show on YouTube that complements that, and your training academy and everything, it's really impressive, and it's been a treat for me to just kind of dive into it leading up to our discussion and learn about all the great things you're doing and watch some of your presentations. I think I watched a presentation, a couple that you gave to, I forget what associations they were, but you've got about 100,000 views on YouTube. So you're a well-known guy out in Ontario there. And I just had a great time chatting with you today and learned a lot. And I know our listeners are really going to enjoy the topic. So any final words, any closing things you want to touch on maybe that we didn't?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to connect with your listeners. My final words of advice, this is something I've been saying often lately, is it's more of like an ask, right? Or a challenge. Let's call it a challenge. I've been challenging people to think differently, and not to steal that from Apple or anything, but it's more about just thinking. And a lot of, with everything that's going on in the world right now, I'm not going to get into specifics, but we can relate this to anything, is the way social media, the way the internet, the way things are set up right now, is the thinking is being done for us, right? We're being told certain things and we're taking it at face value, and we're not doing our own thinking. That's in construction. That's in whatever's happening with the pandemic. That's in what we put into our bodies with food. It's everywhere, right? So I challenge people to think and to actually do their own research. And from that point, don't even believe what you currently, challenge your own thinking and challenge your own beliefs, right? Because just because you believe it doesn't mean it's true, right? There's plenty of things that I believed in the past that are not true anymore. and even now there's things that I'm saying that there's a good chance that in 5 years from now, you'd be like, yeah, that what I believed back then, what I was saying was not true. I've now learned something new, and there's going to be, and here's what I'm saying now, right? But that's the whole point, is we need to continuously challenge ourselves and challenge what's being put in front of us to ultimately make our own decisions, right? Don't let somebody else choose for us. So on that note, like if anybody wants to learn more about our stuff or join the Conch Builder Academy, we got lots of stuff coming out. The best place to go is we created a simple URL. It's actually linked to our Instagram account. So if you just go to theconsciousbuilder.com/Instagram, whatever we're talking about most at that point in time will be there, but you'll have the link to we have a free course for the 5 things I wish I knew before I started my business. We got links to the Conch Builder Academy. We got links to other interviews. So there's all sorts of things going on there, but that'll be the best place. And we got lots of stuff planned for the Conch Builder Academy. So if you're, any of your young guys looking to become contractors or get into construction, there's already some courses up there, but we got stuff coming out on marketing and team management and a few other things we were talking today, but I won't share yet. But we got some good stuff planned for next year.
That's great, Casey. This has been great, and I hope that we can stay in touch and maybe do this again sometime, maybe later in 2022.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much, Dan.
Take care. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Atlanta Construction Podcast. Be sure to follow us on any podcast platform you use. You can also find us on LinkedIn and Instagram at Atlanta Construction Podcast. Be sure to send us a comment or a review. We'd love to engage with you.